A few years ago, I was working on a sermon for Easter weekend, but it just wasn't coming together. I started to feel more pressure because I wanted to say something that would make all the people want to come back. What would be a big hit? What would be the most appealing sermon that I could preach to this crowd? And so I came in here and just began to pray about what I should preach on. I opened up the Bible and I asked myself this question: what did Jesus preach about whenever he talked to the largest crowds? And what I discovered, it really broke me as a preacher. Because when Jesus would preach to the large crowds, he didn't necessarily say what they wanted to hear or what would bring them back. Instead, he challenged their commitment level to him. And so on that Easter weekend, I stood up on stage and with tears in my eyes, I apologized. I said, I'm sorry for sometimes selling Jesus cheap, for watering down the gospel. And I know, like me, it is your prayer that our churches not become stadiums full of fans, but instead our churches are full of completely committed followers.
I'm curious what you thought would happen at church this morning when you woke up and decided that you would come to church. Okay, thank you. Anyone else? Did you think that you would encounter God here today? Did you think that God would encounter you? We spoke about this a little bit on our Bible study this past Tuesday. Most Christians into the high 80s believe when they go to church that they will encounter God in some way. But it is the Christians who go to non-denominational churches, Pentecostal churches, and especially Assembly of God churches, where their members say they actually did encounter God. And that's why those three groups are the only three Christian denominations right now that are growing. Because why wouldn't you want to go to church where God shows up in some way and you leave changed and different? And so, I'll be honest, she's not here, so I can say it. I wasn't, as I was headed off to the North Campus last Sabbath, driving from Longmont, I was wondering, what am I going to encounter as I go into that church today? And then Leanna got up and she spoke. And I wish that we had recorded that sermon, because it struck me. And then through the whole week, it really stuck with me. And as I was working on this sermon, I wrote it about 10 times, and I couldn't capture what Leanna had been able to capture in her sermon. So I'm going to ask her to come and preach it here for us at our South Campus. But this morning, I'll give you my best effort, my version 11. Fans have to be entertained in how they know Jesus. Followers are required to pay a price because they have chosen to be followers of Jesus. There is a big difference between admiring Jesus and following Jesus. And I want to show you something this morning from the Bible that Jesus does, that as a former business owner, if I had heard Jesus was going to do this, I would have said to Jesus, do not do this, Jesus. Going to be terrible for your brand. His marketing director would have said to Jesus, that is a bad idea. Please don't do it. No church growth expert who sees what Jesus is going to do would say, yeah, Jesus, that is really going to grow the church. They would never let him get away with this. We find it in Luke chapter 14 that Chad read for us this morning. And Jesus is at his peak in his ministry in Luke 14. All the crowds are following him. Huge crowds are traveling with him. Everything that the disciples thought that they had been working for is now happening. Jesus has got the numbers, he's got the crowds, there's people all over the hillside, there's more of them walking over the horizon to be with him, and the disciples look around, they go like, wow, this is really going to happen. After years of ministry, this is finally happening. This is the moment where when things are going really well, you want to take it a little easier. This is where you want to say, hey, wherever you are, come on in. Whoever you are, come on in. We've got more space for you. We're so glad that you are here. You don't make it harder for people to join your movement at this point. You want to try and make it easier for more and more people to come and join your group. Except Jesus. He doesn't do that. He turns around to the people who are following him, to this vast crowd that is sitting out there on the hill, and he says to them, whoever does not carry their cross and follow me cannot be my disciple. And I'm sure the disciples are like, what? Why are you telling them this right now? Unless you take up your cross and follow me, you cannot be my disciple. Jesus doesn't sugarcoat it over here. He doesn't try and make this an easier pill for the people to swallow. He comes right out and says it to them. You cannot be my disciple unless you take up your cross and follow me. You ever thought about those words? He's probably the only leader in human history who looked at this growing crowd, this growing movement, this growing following of people and tried to shrink it down. So let me tell you, I put this in the email this morning, but here's what I think has happened to us, not just to TLC, not just to the Adventist Church, but to Christianity in general, and to me as well. The modern church has made discipleship free. Jesus made discipleship costly. And somewhere along the line between Jesus and now, we have gone and swapped the two. We took one of the most expensive words in the whole New Testament and started handing it out for nothing. Disciple. We'll use it for anyone now. Anybody who shows up, anybody who says a prayer, anyone who signs a card, anyone who calls themselves a Christian, we say, here is your name tag, join us, free. But not Jesus. Jesus used that word disciple for people who were willing to die for the cause of Jesus. A very different cost for the same word. And the idea of anybody calling themselves a Christian but not actually following Christ, it's kind of crazy. It should sound absurd to us, but it doesn't anymore. And that's the problem. We've stopped hearing how strange it is. And Jesus knows that we will do this. So he tells the crowd two stories. Same point in both of the stories that he shares with them. He says to them essentially, I want you to take a look at the price tag before you buy it. And in Luke 14:28, he says, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you have money to complete it? So there's this guy who decides he's going to build a building. He digs the foundation. He starts to get the walls in, and then he runs out of money to complete the job. And so now you have this half-completed building sitting on the side of a hill for everybody to see it. And everybody who walks by says the same thing. Look at that building. He started it, and he couldn't finish. For those of you who go to New York, I looked this up. There isn't a building in New York right now that is half completed. It's called One Seaport. It is 60 stories high. It's in downtown Manhattan on some of the most expensive real estate in the world. It was meant to be filled with luxury apartments. They had this beautiful infinity pool. The ceilings for the houses inside were going to be 10 to 12 feet high. You would have the most spectacular views of the harbor. They got to about 670 feet, and then something terrible happened. The building tilted over. It was the foundation. The ground underneath couldn't hold the weight of what they kept stacking onto this building, and the whole building started to sink into the ground. The foundation started to crumble, and it started to tilt on one side. A builder died, and then the lawsuits started. And now everybody who walks past that building, they look at it, at this tilting building, at this glorious structure of glass. You can go pull it up online. It's crooked. It's unfinished. It's stuck in one of the richest skylines in the world. And everybody who walks past it looks at that building and says, wow, somebody started something, but didn't plan to finish it. The foundation couldn't carry the weight of what they were building over there. A faith built on a self you can never actually hand over is that building this morning. It goes up fast, it looks great for a while, but it's sitting on the one foundation that can't hold the weight, and sooner or later it will buckle, and everyone will see it. And then to really drive this point home, Jesus tells a second story about a king who goes to war. Luke 14:31. Suppose a king is about to go to war against another king. Won't he first sit down and consider whether he is able with 10,000 men to oppose the one coming against him with 20,000? 20,000 are coming to attack the king. He's got 10. He's outnumbered 2-1. And Jesus says, doesn't he sit down first and do the math, figure out if he can win this battle before he decides to march out and get all of his troops killed? I went back and looked in history. I'm sure this is a story that is taught in every class here in America. It's the story of someone who didn't sit down and think about the options. His name was George Custer. Montana, 1876. From your reaction, you know the story better than I do. He's riding towards a Native American camp on Little Bighorn River. He sends his scouts out. The scouts come back and tell him, there are too many men. There are way more than you think there really are. This army is much bigger than us. He had all of the information he needed to decide not to march into battle. But he rode right past that information. He was in a hurry. He was sure of himself. And instead of counting, he splits his men and they go and attack. And he was horribly wrong about the numbers. And Custer and every man who went out and fought for him that day died in that battle. We call it Custer's Last Stand. Thank you. Which is a nice name for what it actually was, a total massacre. A guy who didn't stop and consider if he would be able to win. And the men who paid the price for it when they found out that he was wrong. Two stories from Jesus, all trying to make one point. The point is this: don't sign up for the Jesus stuff without first counting what the cost is going to be. You don't want to end up being a half-built tower. You don't want to be the one who goes to war and loses the battle that you should never have marched into. To have a faith that got started but never finished. Somebody who took the name of Jesus but never paid the price for it. And everybody can see that the walls have stopped going up. Now, Jesus tells the story not because he's trying to scare you off. It's the exact opposite. He respects you too much to sell you something, but to hide the price. He wants you to know exactly what you are getting into. We once went on a trip to Massachusetts. We went into this restaurant. We sat down. We ordered food. I was thirsty. It was a hot day like today. I said, "Can I have an iced tea, please?" They said, "Sure." They brought an iced tea. It was in a thimble-sized cup. So I drank that. I said, "Can I get another?" We all got like 10 iced teas. Then the bill came, and we got charged for like 30 or 40 iced teas. Maybe not that much, but we got charged for a lot. We didn't know the cost of what we were getting into at that restaurant in Massachusetts. You got to count it before you build it. You got to look at your battle plan before you go and march it. So this morning I want to ask you, let's spend some time taking a look at the cost of being a disciple of Jesus. Here's where I start negotiating, because I'd love it if the cost were money. I can write a check, and then I know that I've done what's asked of me and keep the rest. If it's a matter of time, I can even give, an hour on Sabbath. I can give you the inconvenience of a Zoom call on Tuesday evening or Thursday night. I'm even willing to give up a little bit of my comfort, come over here, set up the chairs, go out right through the community, pray for them every now and then. And this touches on all of that, what it means to pay a cost. But that is not the cost that Jesus mentions in Luke 14. Look at his words. He says, "Carry your cross." Now, we've heard this idea of a cross so many times that we tend to forget what it is. Carrying a cross is not a hardship. Carrying a cross is not an inconvenience. Carrying a cross is not putting up with singing contemporary music when you wish you could be singing hymns. Carrying a cross is not even sitting in uncomfortable chairs here this morning. A cross, to everybody in the crowd who heard the words of Jesus, they knew exactly what a cross meant. Carrying a cross is an execution. Carrying a cross is dying a terrible death. You didn't carry a cross to be uncomfortable. You carried a cross because you were going to a place where you were going to die. A man carrying a cross was, in the name of that movie, a dead man walking. And everybody who looked at the man carrying the cross knew that he would not be coming back. This is the life that Jesus calls those who call themselves disciples to. Luke 9:23, "Whoever wants to be my disciple must deny themselves and take up their cross daily and follow me." Daily, every day. Because unlike the person who was nailed to a Roman cross, self doesn't die once and stay down. You get off your throne, but by tomorrow morning, guess what? I've climbed right back up on that throne, and I have to die again to get off it. Even Paul, the great missionary, the great Bible scholar, the great writer, wrote, after 30 years of following Jesus, he said, "I die daily." 30 years in, he's still dying daily. If you call yourself a disciple of Jesus Christ, that is the price that you are called to pay. The cost of following Jesus is you. It's not your money. It's not your time. It's not your comfort. Jesus is saying the cost of discipleship is you. Your right to run your own life, your spot on your throne, the one single thing that each one of us guards harder than anything else, my own self. That's the exact thing that Jesus asks you to lay down and walk away from. And that's the price, honestly, that most of us really don't want to pay. We'll pay our cash, we'll put in our time, we'll pay almost as long as we don't have to pay the one thing that changes us as followers. And that's the one thing Jesus says you cannot keep, because you cannot follow Jesus and run yourself at the same time. One of you, one of us, one of me has to step off that throne. So here's the question for all of us sitting here this morning in this room. You call yourselves a disciple. I call myself a disciple. But have we actually paid for the word, or have we been getting the name for free? Because there's a lot of us who are living the free version of discipleship. We like Jesus. We agree with Jesus. We'll show up occasionally for Jesus. We'll even tell strangers sometimes that we are the followers of Jesus. Yet self is still sitting there on the throne, running the whole show, and Jesus is just a passenger that we are really fond of having with us. But that is not discipleship. That's being a fan, cheering for a guy that I haven't actually handed my life over to. A fan loves Jesus from a distance and keeps his life. A disciple hands the keys over to Jesus. Jesus didn't die for fans. He's never asked for fanship. In Luke 14, he literally turns around and tries to talk people out of being fans of Jesus. And you want to know which one you are? I can tell you, it shows up in the little stuff. You pray for guidance for something from God, but actually you've already made up your mind what you want the answer to be. You don't want His will to be done, but yours. That's self that's sitting on a throne. You read parts of the Bible, you say that you want to learn something, but you turn to the passages that you agree with. And when you get to the parts that talk about money or temper or the person that you've decided to resent, you say, man, the person sitting next to him here in church, they really should read this passage because this really applies to them. That's self sitting on the throne. You follow him right up to the point on the line where you've quietly decided that you are not crossing that line for anyone, not even for Jesus. We've all got that line, be it a relationship, be it a grudge, be it a habit, be it our selfishness, be it our temper, be it the plan that we've decided, this is how my life is going to be, and this is how I'm going to live it. And we welcome God in our lives right up until we reach that line. But not an inch further than that. That line, that's ourself sitting on the throne. And as long as we're sitting on it, then you can call yourself a fan of your Lord Jesus Christ. But let's be honest this morning. You're not a disciple. So here it is. We call ourselves disciples. My challenge to you this morning is you've chosen of your own volition to take on that title. Be one. Nobody put that name on us. We chose to pick it up. We're the ones who have said we're followers of His. If you've chosen that this morning, I challenge you, follow Him. Let's not wear the word, but not pay the bill. Either put the name down, no shame in it, or let's be honest and let's pay it off. But don't do what most of us will do, which is keep the name, but not pay the cost. Now I know this has been heavy up until this point. And if that's all I said to you this morning, I would be lying to you. Because here comes the best part. And I want you to take this with you this morning. I want you to see what happens when you are willing to lay it all down. To say, I'm all in. To say, I will pay the price. I will pay the cost of being a disciple. The self that you carry, that currently sits on your throne, that self is a terrible boss. Think about it. How many times in your life, when you are the one that is in charge of everything that you do, how many times has it really led to happiness for you? Has running your own life really given you any peace? The self we guard with everything we've got is the most exhausting, the most anxious, the most impossible master that any of us has ever worked for. You think your boss at work is bad? No, you are your own worst boss. Because it never says, well done. It never lets you rest. Every time you get close to what you think the goalposts are, it moves them. You've served it your whole life, and it has never once been truly satisfied. And it is into that Jesus says this: whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. It's the mystery of the gospel. I can't explain it. I don't understand it. You don't lose your life when you hand it over to Him. You lose the thing that is killing you right now, and you get a new life back that you won't even recognize. The striving stops, or all that auditioning for the boss who was never going to clap. You stop all of that white knuckling it every second of your life, trying to protect your image or your reputation. You can stop performing once you have died to Christ. You will actually get to rest on Sabbath. You find out what you were really put on this world for. And after all of those years of running yourself into the ground, now you will really start to thrive. And people meet someone like that, and they know that there is something different about them, even when they can't put their finger on it. I was talking to a man last Sabbath. He just got a job at Amazon. Apparently, they've opened up this massive new Amazon warehouse. He's got a job there. He says it's back-breaking work. But here's what he loves about this job. He's been on the job for a week. While he was working one day, a random person came up to him and said, "There's something different about you. Are you a Christian?" He said, "I am, but I'm more than that. I'm a Seventh-day Adventist Christian." The guy looked at him. His face kind of fell, shock. He said, "I knew it." He said, "My grandfather was a Seventh-day Adventist, and he was just like you." This is why Jesus can turn around after these hard words. He can turn around and he can say, "My yoke is easy and my burden is light." It's not because it's cheap. It isn't. It will cost you everything. But because the thing He lifts off you is crushing you right now, and the self that He asks you to give up is the very thing that is killing you, you hand Him a tyrant. He hands you back your life with Him running it instead of you. The cost is everything, but it's still the best deal that has ever been offered to anyone. And then one more thing. This is the part that takes the guilt out of this. Jesus has never asked you to carry a cross that he did not carry first. When he said, "Carry your cross and follow me," he was walking with the cross on him. He knew where that road would go. He wasn't marking up a price that he wasn't willing to pay himself. He paid it in full on a hill outside of the city. He paid it with his arms stretched open. And he gave himself up for you and for me before he ever asked you to give yourself up for him. And this passage was never about earning your way to him by how much you were willing to sacrifice. He paid that price for you that saves you. The cross you carry is not a payment that you make to Jesus. It's just what it looks like when you walk behind a man who is already carrying his cross. The word disciple carries a price. Jesus never tried to hide that from his followers. He never marked it down. He never once pretended that it was free. The cost this morning as a follower, as a disciple of Jesus Christ, is yourself. And a lot of us have been wearing the name without paying for it and calling that Christianity. Jesus is not asking for your money. He's not asking for an hour on Sabbath. He's saying, if you want to be my disciple, you have to give up your throne. You have to hand over the keys. The one seat that you've never handed to anyone else. And he's asking because the self on the throne is wrecking you today. And he wants to take its place. And he's the only master who has ever loved you enough to die for you first. So this morning, if you're going to call yourself a disciple, then let it cost whatever it costs. Come off that throne. Give him the keys. Lose the life that is killing you right now. Yes, it is the highest price that you will ever pay. And on the other side of that, for the first time in your life, you will actually be truly free. Whoever loses their life for me will find it.